Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and since I did a comparative Venom review, I figured I might as well cover the Spider-Man figures. Now there are tons and tons of Spider-Man figures. These are my top four. One for the black suit and then three for the red and blue suit, since that's the standard outfit for Spider-Man. Let's go ahead and identify them and then we'll get started. This is the Sinister Six Spider-Man. This is the Fearsome Foes Spider-Man. This is the Spider-Man Classics Todd McFarlane designed Spider-Man. And this is the Red Hulk Target exclusive wave black suit Spider-Man. Okay, these two here, the McFarlane one and the Fearsome Foes one, have the exact same body with a different head, slightly different paint app. The other two are completely different. We'll go ahead and start with the black suit since he is the one most by himself. Okay, black suit Spider-Man. He does use at least part of the standard generic Hasbro Marvel Legends body. I think it's mostly that body. Quicksilver, maybe. I'm not sure if it's Quicksilver or the other one, but personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. It's got great articulation, but the sculpting is just so kind of so-so. I mean, look at the shape of that body compared to, let's use this one. Well, I guess these are all bad examples because these all have sculpting issues, but this one's really boxy looking compared to this one, although this one has the big shoulders. Bad example, but either way, if you look, he's got kind of like square biceps. Very square shaped. His legs are kind of blocky. Anyway, it's still good. Let's talk about articulation before we do anything else. His head is on the standard neck disc right there with the rotation at the top. He's got that in and out shoulder movement, which is really good for Spider-Man, so I like that a lot. Standard ball joint. Bicep swivel there. Double jointed elbows. Wrist rotation at the forearm and at the wrist. I don't get why we have both. We don't need both. This should have been a solid piece. It would have been cheaper and it would have looked better. So just the rotation in the wrist would have been fine. And he's got the hinge there. Same on both sides. He's got the ab crunch. Nice range of motion out of the ab crunch there. Waist rotation. Ball jointed hips. The kind where you have to rotate them around to bring them forward. But they are there with the thigh swivel. Double jointed knees, a shin split, and ankle rotation. Again, we don't need both. In my opinion, this should have been one solid piece. It would have looked better, and it doesn't really serve a purpose since it's down here too. And then he's got the hinge in here. No ankle rocker at all, and not a great range of motion forward for this. Pretty decent backwards, but forward, that's about as far as it goes. Now, my biggest complaint about this guy, other than the ankle articulation, is the shading on him. The shading looks great, but it doesn't really line up all over the place. If you look at his shin in particular, he's got shading on this side of the top part, and over here it's on this side. Same thing here. There's shading right here, none below it, and then there's shading back here and none above it. So I don't really care for that. Otherwise it looks pretty good. He also doesn't have a web shooter hand or a fist hand, so he's just got the kind of semi-open hand there and the more open hand there. Could definitely be a little better. There's a close look at the two hands. I would prefer different ones. His head is not bad. It's really plain, but that's what it's supposed to be. It is kind of a peanut head. It looks a little bit small in the body just because of that tall neck. That's which body it is. I think it's the Union Jack body because he's got that really tall neck. But I'm not positive. So he does have the tall neck and kind of a peanut head, but it's still better than the other version of the Black Suit Spider-Man. And it's relatively inexpensive, I think. I know I got this one for $2 at Target when they were clearancing them out, but I think you can get them for pretty cheap on eBay. So I would definitely recommend you get him for the Black Suit Spider-Man. In terms of the red and blue suit Spider-Man, you can't really go wrong with any of these three. As I said, these two have the exact same body, so we'll save them for the next. Let's do this guy now. He's supposed to have like a web thing that goes on his back here. I don't know where it is right now, so it's not on him obviously, but he does come with that. Now, the biggest complaint about this guy is his shoulders. They stick out kind of weird, so that's not the best thing. But otherwise, I think he's just about perfect. He's got just enough muscle to him. He's not too skinny, and he's got great articulation. One thing I should point out, all three of these figures have pretty bad paint applications for the webbing. There's lots of extra black in places. If you look, he's got like a black line on his head, and his shoulder area is really dark. These guys are missing some black here and there. So there's not great paint app for any of them. So you can just go ahead and cross that off the list. None of them are going to look great. Let's talk about articulation. He's got a hinge at the top of the neck here. It's getting closer. He's got a hinge at the top of the neck and the rotation that goes on top of that. Got a hinge at the bottom of the neck, and that rotates as well. So you can get the neck in all kinds of different poses. He's got a shoulder hinge that swings out like kind of like a Silver Surfer or Iceman. Then he's got the standard ball joint on top of that. Bicep swivel. Double jointed elbows. Great range of motion there. A wrist cut joint. Wrist pivot. And then each finger is articulated individually, so you can do the web shooting pose if you want to. Same thing on both sides there. His ab crunch is really low. I like that personally. It looks a little bit more natural, but it is somewhat limited. When it goes forward, it only goes about that far. It doesn't look too bad overall. You could really go either way with the higher ab crunch or the low one. This one is a little bit loose. I'm not sure if that was a common thing for this guy, but this one is pretty loose for that. He's got the waist twist down there and the good type of ball jointed hips. Thigh rotation, which is sculpted in wonderfully. You can barely tell that there's a difference between the ball joint and the thigh, so that's sculpted great. Double jointed knee there. He's got a shin split. I think I might have glued these because they were loose. I'm not sure. They're really tight though, but there's a thin, a shin rotation right there. Then the full workup for the ankles again. Ankle rocker, ankle pivot, toe joint, which is a really nice toe joint because it's relatively sturdy and it's a little bit farther back than most, so I like that. Like I said though, the paint app is not great on these guys. And for some reason, even though his legs are all blue, they used red discs in there, so you can see that, and red pins too, so sometimes that shows through. But otherwise, it's a really great Spider-Man. You can get him in some really, really nice poses. Tons and tons of posability here due to the articulation. Obviously, this isn't the best pose because I just threw it together real quick. But it's a good example of what you can do with him. Lots of nice web crawling poses with this guy. No problem at all. One last thing I wanted to mention about this figure, I realized after I stopped filming the main segment, was that I forgot to show you, he's got this articulation in here that I mentioned, but he also has, just like the other one, he's got this in here. So it rotates forward and backwards really well. Actually, maybe even better than the McFarlane version. So he's got the forward and backward, plus the up and down. He's got like 5-way shoulders, including the ball joint. So they go forward and backwards like that. And they have the hinge here. So lots of movement in those shoulders. Really nice design. This is probably my favorite overall, I guess. Well, I can't say that. I like this one and the McFarlane one equally, so they're both my favorite. So there you go. I just wanted to clear up that one little bit. Let's talk about these guys. The main difference in the paint app is the Fearsome Foes Spider-Man has the lighter blue, and the McFarlane one has the darker, more of a cobalt blue. Excuse me, that was my phone ringing, I had to get that. Anyway, the red's a little bit brighter on the McFarlane one. I don't know if it's supposed to be or if it's just the way the paint wash turned out, but that's the way it is on this guy. This one has a little bit more black to him. But that's really about it in terms of paint. The articulation is the exact same. The only difference in the sculpt is the heads. If you look, this one has more of the old school Spider-Man head with the real tight webbing and the more narrow eyes, more of a split. What word am I thinking of? I don't know, but he's got really narrow eyes. And this one has obviously the bigger eyes, which is my favorite Spider-Man head. I really like that, the design with the big eyes. So this one's my favorite out of all of them. But this one has a much more muscular body, so I like that too. Either way, you can't go wrong. Let's talk about articulation. The head, standard neck articulation, no extra joint at the bottom of the neck there. So he's on the neck disc with the rotation. These shoulders are by far the best Spider-Man shoulders because they rotate forward. and they look great when they do it. Obviously they stick out a little bit in the back, but not a whole lot. You can rotate them forward or back, and they don't look terrible, although they didn't sculpt the webbing on the shoulders, on the insides of the shoulders there. But as far as the sculpt goes, they don't really stick out awkwardly ever, and you can get some really nice poses out of him. So those, I love that shoulder joint there. Then he's got the regular ball joint on the outside of that, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, wrist rotation in the forearm, wrist pivot, basically the same articulation as the other one, and then the individual fingers for doing the web thing or whatever you want to do, no problems. He's got the higher ab crunch in there, which looks really good no matter what you do with it. It doesn't ever look really too awkward, and he's got good range of motion. For the waist, it actually it's kind of cupped like the Magneto figure, but it doesn't increase the articulation, it just still rotates. So I'm not sure why they did it like that. I think a cut joint would have been okay, but it's not bad. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference, so that's fine with me. He's got the good hip joints where they just go forward and side to side. Then you can rotate the thigh, obviously, there. These figures, both of these guys, are known for having a little bit loose hip joints, but they're not too bad. And they're not too obvious that there's a joint there. I mean, obviously there's a ball joint, but they don't stick out too bad. And the shoulders are sculpted really well. They blend in nicely. Double jointed knee there, same rotation at the top of the boot, and the same articulation at the ankle. Regular pivot, plus the ankle rocker, plus the toe joint, which is, like I said, more forward than the other one, but still works. Not as much, but still works just fine. Again, just like the other one, although even probably a little bit better, this Spider-Man has, I think, the best posability, and he's the most cool-looking Spider-Man. The ab crunch isn't as usable as the other one, but the legs and everything else, I think, just look even better. Great-looking Spider-Man figure. Lots of posability for actually any of them, but you can't go wrong with this one or this one. If you had to pick one, I would pick either of these guys. Right there, the Sinister Six or the McFarlane. Both of them are, well, this one's pretty valuable, this one's not so much, and then this one comes in with the McFarlane one is in terms of eBay pricing, but they're all still really good figures. And then of course you have the black suit Spider-Man, which is not nearly as good as the other ones, but still the best black suit Spidey out of the bunch. So there you have it. There's my comparative review on all the Spider-Man figures. You can't go wrong with any of them, but if you're going to pick just one, pick one of these two guys right here, the Sinister Six or the McFarlane Spider-Man. Won't be upset with this one either, obviously, but those are my two favorites. If you're going to get a black suit Spidey, that's the one to go with. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it was informative. Keep an eye out for some more Spider-Man related reviews and some more custom figures. And in the meantime, keep collecting.